Dr. Atchison here, and we're talking about Chapter 8 on attention and awareness. Right now we're going to be talking about selective attention and those limits of awareness. So while this is a perception class, in order to be able to really perceive something, attention is an important component. And I really feel this video here, Nova, Magic in the Brain, does a really good job of integrating a lot of the visual things that we've talked about with the piece of attention. So I really would like you to watch this video before you go through the lecture, just because I think it gives a nice background to where we've done so far, and then where we're going with this attention piece. Okay, so selective attention and the limits of awareness. Awareness is that active thinking or concentration on some source of stimulation. So this is all stuff from your intro class. And if you've taken a cognitive class, you're probably going to have spent a lot of time on this. But it's important to remember that, that we talk about these classes as though they're separate. We'll have a perception class and a cognitive class and a development class and all these different things. But the thing is, they're not separate. They're not discrete. All of these things are happening in conjunction with each other. So there is some overlap. And so it's important for us to talk about attention and awareness because it plays a big role in our perception. And attention is the selection of some source of sensory stimulation for increased cognition. So we're going to spend more time on one thing. I'm listening for something. I'm looking at something. When you're focusing on something, when you're foveating on something, you're putting your attention onto it. So again, these two pieces are going to be very, very important for perception, especially for accurate perception. So selective attention is the attention to some things and not others. And we can look at this in kind of two ways. We have divided attention, where we're actively paying attention to two or more tasks at the same time. So when we're multitasking, we're engaged in divided attention. So if I'm watching my daughter while I'm trying to prepare slides and trying to, make sure dinner's cooking, I have divided attention. I'm trying to actively pay attention, listen for what my daughter's doing, listen for what is happening at the stove while working on slides. That would be divided attention. Where focused attention is what I'm doing right now. I've sequestered myself off and I have no other tasks other than to focus on this lecture and to talk to you guys. So I'm acutely aware of this one thing that I'm supposed to be doing. I'm focusing my attention on that. And we'll see that both of these things go on. When we have focused attention, that will give us more information about that one thing that we're paying attention to. But we're going to end up missing some other things. There's going to be limits to our awareness then. And divided attention, we're not going to get as good of information from those three different things that we're doing than when we're doing one thing in a focused way. In fact, even with the slides, I have to always go back through them before I start the lecture in a focused attention way to make sure I got everything done the way it needed to be done when I was dividing my attention. So one of these things that we talk about in terms of selective attention is the cocktail party phenomenon. And there is a Launchpad activity for this. It also talks about dichotic listening task. So please go through that and explore it. It's primarily talking about auditory stimuli, which we haven't gotten to yet. But the principle still applies. And we do see that this cocktail party phenomenon is also happening with vision as well as audition. So again, please do this Launchpad activity. It is part of your assignment. So to continue talking about selective attention and limits of awareness, inattentional blindness is defined by your textbook as a failure to perceive a salient stimuli when you're paying attention to other locations, when you're paying attention to other things. So the famous example of this is the basketball example, which I'll show you here in a second. I'll give you a link for, and it's also linked. But basically what we see is that because we're so focused on one main thing, we're going to miss, we have focused attention on one thing. We're going to have limits to our awareness. We're not going to see other things that are really, really big, really, really huge differences, really, really huge activities because of our focused attention. That we won't even, these things won't even encroach into our awareness. And we see that, that this is primarily happening in this prefrontal cortex, and there's also an article that I have linked for you to read about this as well. But this is, again, that failure to perceive some sort of something because it's happening in an area we're not attending to, we're not paying attention to. Again, this is going to be the most famous example of that, and this is copyrighted from Daniel Simmons, so we're not going to be able to show it within this video, but I have it linked both on the YouTube channel and on Canvas as well. So please make sure you watch this video on inattentional blindness. Your book also discusses some other examples of inattentional blindness experiments, and what we see from all of these together is that even when you're looking, really focusing on something, you're not going to see something else if you're not paying attention. So that really attention is important. So when you're not paying attention to that inattentional, you can be blind to other things. This is not just with vision. We actually see it with auditory as well. We can call it inattentional deafness. So we see this phenomenon of missing salient stimuli because of that focused attention. So we're going to miss information. Another example of these is change blindness. Now, change blindness is different than inattentional blindness. Inattentional blindness is you don't see something because of your focused attention. You don't see something else because of your focused attention. Where change blindness is that you're not able to detect changes between two scenes, especially very quick differences. It's going to take you're not going to be able to quickly determine those. You'd have to go piece by piece to kind of figure out what it is. So it happens again when a person fails to notice a difference has occurred, not something that was present all along but not attended to. So here's an example of that. Look at this scene. I'm going to take it away. I'm going to give you another scene. What's different? Can you tell me? Chances are you can't. The things that you're paying attention to are going to be very different than the kinds of changes that we have in change blindness. This is a very complex scene, so it's really hard to determine what were the differences between these two images. But when I put them next to each other, then it's kind of like the what's different pictures from our highlights magazines when we were kids. And if you go through the image, you can go piece by piece and you can figure out what's different. What's different is this window here is not present in the second video, in the second picture. So again, you likely didn't notice that difference, and that is change blindness. Change blindness primarily has been documented in these kinds of situations, and there was a lot of criticism saying, well, this isn't real. Just because you're not noticing these differences, how is that applicable for your real life? What's the external validity for that? And so again, Simons and Levins did a study where they actually documented change blindness in real life. So again, this video is linked for you on both Canvas and on YouTube, and this one's really enjoyable. It's called The Door Study. I highly recommend you need to be watching this because it's really interesting to see the change blindness that's taking place here. So again, what we're getting from all of this is looking at something isn't the same as seeing it. So we looked at those two pictures, those two complex scenes, and we didn't see everything. We looked at them, but we didn't necessarily see it. We were looking at something in the inattentional blindness video, but we didn't see something else. We were looking at, the participant was looking at something in the change blindness door study, but they didn't see something. That again, there's a difference between just actively kind of having your eyes in the right place, and that piece of cognition is part of this. So for perception really to be taking place on an active level, that cognition is an important part of this. And so again, these things are very, very integrated. It's just the same thing as you can be listening to a conversation, but you may not be hearing a conversation. My dad is famous for this. He can be listening, air quotes, to you, but he is off in his head somewhere and has not heard a single thing you said. So again, these things are different. That attention and that awareness is what changes that. You have to pay attention and be aware to fully understand what you're perceiving, what you're looking at, what you're hearing. You have to really have that level of awareness. And again, what we talked about a little bit already is the frontal cortex may be really important to this. There's actually new evidence that just came out this year in 2016 that the frontal cortex really may be controlling vision through attention. So everything that we've learned about the occipital cortex and its role in vision, the idea of this article, and again, this is new work, so this is just a proposed idea, and there's some evidence to support it, that all that stuff that's happening in the occipital cortex is a function of prefrontal cortex control. And so again, that is linked for you on your Canvas page. It's a Science Daily release of a research article. So it's kind of like Cliff Notes for a research article, so that you can kind of get the idea of it without having to bog yourself down in the actual study. So please read that. That is required. Gist awareness is the idea that it only takes one fixation to recognize kind of the meaning of something or the gist of something, the basic idea of something. And in fact, the other day, my first grader was playing with the second grader, and my first grader was telling the second grader a story, and the second grader was like, okay, I get the gist of it. And my first grader was like, what? She was like, it's like the basic idea. So it's, again, gist awareness is that we can look at these things for very, very brief amounts of time, and we can get the general idea about a scene. Researchers found that people can recognize the gist or this overall meaning with 80% accuracy after only 36 milliseconds of viewing. So with very, very short times for perception, we're going to be able to kind of pull that information out. One of the ways that they're testing this is through rapid serial visual presentation. And it's really similar to flipping through channels on the screen, except you're going really, really fast. So they're doing about 3 to 10 pictures a second. So we're talking about very, very quickly. It's a procedure where they have to notice if there's a certain kind of scene is there. So they might be telling them, okay, there's a scene, there's a carnival scene, or there's a picnic scene, or there's a dinner scene. And any of those scenes can look very different in very different situations. And they're supposed to detect whether they see the scene or not. And again, these pictures are being given very, very, very quickly, 3 to 10 seconds. And what they see is that these experiments show that this brief exposure allows them to get this gist. But it doesn't give any information about other elements in the scene. And it also, they weren't getting other information about other images that they were being shown. They were primarily able to detect if that scene was there, but were not able to necessarily recognize other scenes that they had been presented with. So that attention, that awareness, that focusing in on a picnic scene, the example from your book, was enabling them to detect that very, very rapidly. That perception was different because of attention. And that's, again, why this chapter is even covered in a perception class, is because attention and awareness is playing a very, very integral role in our perception. So this ends our first lecture for Chapter 8. Thanks.